Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
So guys, this is Austin Linney with Construct Your Life. This podcast might be more for me and Ryan than it is for y'all, but we're still going to bring you a ton of value. Guys, if you're ever having a bad day, just call this son of a bee up and he'll make you happy. Look at that smile. You know, we rocked the guys. I'm so happy to get him on the podcast because I could say I knew him when, because he's becoming famous. I mean, you're everywhere, dude.
Dude, thank you, man, for that reflection. First of all, nothing feels different yet, but it is really amazing, man. I mean, you know, when you follow your heart, it'll lead you to a lot of weird places, but whatever it leads you to will be exactly where you're meant to be. And that is what I'm experiencing at this very moment in time.
well, you know, just to go back, and we don't have to share the whole story because, you know, some things are private, but ultimately understanding that your decision to give first without expectations, and I'm going to hit on that word for a while because I want to talk about it. But for your, you know, the plan that you devise, which I'm sure one day you'll write a book. I think we talked about that. You're writing a book about it, you know, has served me as well too. And kind of, you know, share as much as you want to about, you know, how you got into rooms that you probably, you know, you should be in, but before you were really set up.
Yeah. It's a combination, you know, and I've tried to really think about this extensively as of late, because I do want to write a book on this. And the book's name, I'll tell the book's name, because the more I put it out there, the more the people are going to expect it from me, and the more expectations, the better I'll be able to actually serve it. So the book's going to be called Friends in High Places. And it's all about how to network. And it's not based on these tactics that people have of how to win people over, any of this stuff. It's literally meant about tuning into what your unique magic is, which is vague, right? I don't have an exact way to tell people exactly what that is. But, you know, if you have the space to tune into your life and actually understand what people reflect to you the most, right? Maybe they say, wow, you know, like you were saying, you just have the ability to make anything positive, right? You have the ability to brighten anyone's day, right? If you take that in and you really hone in on it, and then you go, okay, you know, who do I want to connect with in the world? And how can I take that unique magic, infuse it into what they like, and then be able to create like essentially a buffet to give them, right? And so like for me, it's been realizing what I do really well in the world that comes naturally to me, what these people that I want to interact with like, and what they might be missing from the world, and then just connecting the dots. That's really the strategy, right? And so it's a little vague, but for people listening, it's really just like tuning into like who you are and what you bring to the table, and then connecting the dots of what's missing in the people's lives that you want to connect with, that you can provide for them.
There's a guy that I follow. I followed him for many years. He had a bunch of real estate shows. He's a high-end designer, flipper, luxury dude out in the Hollywood Hills. Very popular, has a huge podcast. And then I think about my relationships with like higher money guys and people that have made money. You know what they value more than anything? Direct conversation.
Yeah.
Like his client was Anthony Anderson, you know, the dude on Blackish, dude, the guy does Hollywood people. And they asked him, they said, Anthony, what do you like most about Jeff? And he goes, Jeff just tells me exactly how it is. He's vulnerable and he owns up to everything. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I have sat across from dudes that were, you know, do $1 billion deals. And I told them to man up and stop playing small. And, you know, some people will be like, what the fuck is this? And then the guy leans forward. This was like a couple weeks ago, leans forward and goes, hey, thank you.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, and like, it was just me going with my gut and saying like, he needs to hear that right now. You know?
Well, there's two things there, right? Number one, if you have a lot of money and you're around a lot of other people with a lot of money, then your main thing is not money anymore. Like, I don't know what point of that, you know, what point it reaches with money that you don't care anymore.
About 350,000 a year, I've heard.
Perfect. And so like when you get to that level, you're not really worried about making more money to the degree that people that are broke are trying to make money, right? Like you have other priorities at that point. And I think the other thing too is that when your life is designed like that with business, a lot of times you need more play and fun in your life, right? And so like by you being essentially in the mind of a child and being open and not worried about what people are going to think of you because it's coming directly from your heart, those people are going to hear that and go, wow, that person just made me feel better. And you know what's hard to buy with money? feeling better, right? You might be able to rent the shit out of it, but you really can't buy it. And that's what a lot of people realize with money.
Well, what's interesting is I was talking to a client this morning. I have the mindset coach for the Alabama football team, the Patriots. I've had billionaires. I've had the dude that runs like 15 high-level coaches. And you know what I realized, and MLB All-Stars, I've had him on the podcast. What everybody, every one of those people have is they always have a notepad, and they're always intrigued to learn. They're humble learners. And every time I looked at all of them on scale, and I was like, yeah, they might have different abilities. They might have grown up somewhere different. But it's like, literally, I'm worth millions. I've been to the top of the mountain, and I'm here with my notebook learning about cannabis and NFTs. And they're just like, they're so excited about it. And I realize they're always open for more.
Well, you know what I think that is too, is that, you know, whether it's the money that got them there, or really, I think that they were able to get the money because of this. They learned some way, shape, or form to not put too much pressure on themselves. Because when you put a lot of pressure on yourself, whatever you do, regardless of how much you love it, it's going to become a job and it's not going to be fun anymore. And so I think that when you get to a certain level of business, you understand that there's going to be ups and downs, and they're just two sides of the same coin. You don't put pressure on it other than, like, you know, making sure that you're fulfilling your duties. And so for these people, they don't mind being the beginner because they understand that being the beginner is just the other side of being an expert. And to the degree that you can be a beginner, you can get into the beginner's mindset and pick up things that even the experts don't realize because they've been in that world for so long. And so it's this beautiful, like, you know, power zone of being able to tune into all the newness, but also come up with a beginner's mindset that can notice things and actually reflect things back to the people that have been doing this for years that they might not even realize because they're just in it all the time. They're so in it that they actually can't take an outside perspective because they're so in it and they're so good at it, they're putting pressure on themselves. And so I think that's really what's going on there. And what I've experienced too, when I get into something new, is I'm not afraid to ask questions because I know I suck at it. You know, that's why I'm there learning. So
yeah. And I think what's interesting is, like, I was doing a rant the other day, and something that saved my bacon really. There's two factors going on, especially in business deals, clients, coaching, just everywhere. It's expectations, and then there's victimhood, and then there's, extreme ownership, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that I would not be sober. I truly believe that I would have ran my car off of a tall mountain in the last couple of days if it wasn't for, two things. What expectations did I place on this? That's on me. What part do I play in this? And what am I trying to learn? And let me explain something to you. Those three right there sometimes feel like you have a razor running through your, trying to, like, get to the point. But I've always found that with those, I can at least get to a space of, like, middle.
Absolutely. Well, I think because, like, I'll speak for myself. Oftentimes I forget that there's levels to this shit, right? So you take extreme ownership, let's say once in your life, and you're like, I got this down. And then when the victimhood comes out, right? Because it happens, we're all human beings. We have the human condition, and we're programmed that way too from society and things like that. And people that expected the best for us, or, wanted the best for us, but did so, and taught us based on their limitations as well. When we're able to do that, we're able to at least pattern interrupt and go, okay, wait, let me take an outside perspective. Let me realize what's happening right now. Oh, I had expectations, like you said. Oh, I might be feeling a little bit of victim. And rather than judging that part of me, what can I learn about it? Okay, cool. So I came up against another one of my edges. If this type of, catastrophe or event happens in my life, then the victim is still there. So now there's an opportunity, if we then jump into extreme ownership again, to learn from it, Dude, I feel it, man.
I hate you so much right now.
Dude, I've been dealing with it too. It's like, it's so funny, man.
Well, here's what happens. Happens, right? My standards are super high for myself, but even I lean out, like I'll always work out. I'll always eat good. I'll always do things, but those are things that are ingrained in me. Mm-hmm. It's the other aspects of myself where really what you want to do, and maybe this should be what you do, is just fucking scream. Like, what the fuck? Like, I called my dad yesterday and I'm like, what the fuck is going on right now? And please tell me. And he's like, okay. So, and like, he told me exactly what I knew, but just to have somebody else say, like, hey, you're being tested right now. Like, are you going to do it? And, the thing is like, there is part of me, and I'll just be 100% vulnerable. There's part of me that just wants to give up. I'll be 100% frank. And there's part of me that says like, dude, you were addicted to meth and you were an alcoholic. Like, this is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, this is a fucking Tuesday, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that was way worse. Like, and so I keep saying to myself one simple thing. I get to choose my heart.
Yes. You know, I say that often in a very similar way. I say, you got to fight for the life you want. And the life you want, depending on whatever it is, life's going to throw challenges at you. It's going to throw curveballs at you. But the only difference is whether or not those curveballs are going to be thrown at something that you actually want in life, or be thrown as a result of you not choosing to do what you want in life. And as a result, you're going to end up suffering. And so when you look at it that way, it makes it a pretty easy choice. Well, challenges are going to be thrown at me regardless. It might as well be for what my heart's calling for. That's the decision we get to make in every moment of every day. And it doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean that I'm over here, everything's love and light and I never experience challenges. I go through it too. I had my screaming moment last week, but at the same time, allow ourselves, like one of the best methods for this that I heard was some guy, I forget his name, but he was saying that he integrates his human side with his more like spiritual side, let's say, right? So if something frustrating happens, like what happened with either you or I the last week, he sets a timer on his phone for 2 minutes and he goes fully into the victim. He fucking screams. He's like, why is this happening to me? And then when that timer goes off, he goes, okay, now what can I do to fix it? And that is the perfect integration, right? Because then you're not trying to spiritually bypass and be like, I don't feel this, right? You're going to fucking feel it. You're human. And what you want is not happening, right? So you're going to feel that resistance. But a lot of times it's what we resist that persists. And so if we don't actually let that out, well, then we're going to let it out on our partner, our kids, our friends. You know, we're just going to feel that disdain inside instead of just fucking letting it out and roaring like a lion and then actually asking yourself, okay, what can I do now? That's the way I do it, you know?
So for anybody that's listening, our internet just went completely out. So thank God I have an iPad. So here we are, we're back. So it's funny that you say that when you're saying take the time and say, 2 minutes on my phone, 5-second rule, 5 minutes, all that stuff. I think if I'm being honest with myself, I'm not giving myself the time to just be upset. Right. Like I'm saying, and the thing is like, there's a grace to just letting it be what it is and saying like, hey, this is not cool. I'm going to feel that. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing, because the issue that I see in most people is they don't feel it at all. And then this thing persists for 2 to 3 to 4 years. And it's the root of this one little thing.
Yes, 100%. To the degree that we do not feel every emotion in our life is the degree to which we're not going to be able to feel any emotion fully. And so like when you realize that, like Joseph Campbell so famously stated, bliss is any emotion felt all the way through. To the degree that you want to be the happiest you've ever felt, you need to be able to experience the saddest place you've ever been, right? To the degree that you want to experience excitement, you're going to potentially need to experience anger, right? Like all of these emotions are part of one color wheel. And I think that what happens, at least for me, I'll speak for myself, what happened for me is that I ended up unconsciously learning, right? Or programming myself, I'm not exactly sure how it happened, that there were desirable emotions and undesirable emotions. And like, that makes sense logically, right? Like I'd rather be happy than sad. But when you actually play that out, well, then you end up kind of riding this gray line for a long time. And that's what ended up happening with me and cannabis, right? Like that's how I started this whole movement that I'm doing now with Conscious Cannabis, was because I realized that when my father passed away, it was extremely hard for me. And rather than feel it, because it was really shitty, I decided to run from it and numb myself out with cycles of busyness, overworking out and getting tendonitis all over my body, and using cannabis unconsciously. And so rather than judge myself for those things, I was able to actually go back in time to that period of my life, show that version of myself love through, plant medicines and other coaches and things like that, and actually bring that version of myself that was traumatized back into my wholeness. Because I think that whenever we have anything happen, this is what soul retrieval is in shamanism, right? It's like an event happens that was so traumatizing that you couldn't process it in the moment. So therefore, a part of your soul still lives in the past at that time. And then therefore, you do not feel whole. And so you're looking for wholeness in the external world, but you'll never find it until you actually look within, right? Like looking within is the last true frontier. We're so worried, as a society about looking out, what's in the stars, but the last true frontier is the mind, is the actual being. And I think that the more we can tap into that, the more we're going to be able to find that wholeness from within. and the less we're going to be concerned about these emotional states. They still fucking suck when they happen, right? But you're going to be able to remember it quicker that like, oh, this is just another side. This is just another flavor of the ice cream wheel that is human emotion.
When I'm in these kind of like, let's call them murky waters, where some things are kind of disheveled, I always find myself going back to Don Miguel Ruiz and reading, a 5 levels of attachment, of 4 agreements, and to me, it's like, it's exactly what I need to hear, like right in that moment. And, I'll be 100% frank, like, we're traveling, we're in 200 square feet. It's not always roses. It's hot as fuck right now in the summer, I'm still working out every day, but not to the level that I want to. And so, there's these conversations, these internal conversations that you're saying, okay, you're doing good. You're doing everything that you should, but you're not feeling it the way. And one of the things that me and my other podcast hosts talk about is like, you got your gratitude list out, you're doing your morning meditation, but you're not embodying it anymore. You're not feeling it. You're just a checklist, right? Like that's what we've turned the morning routine. And so, what this is saying to me is maybe it's time to shake it up. Maybe it's time to do something a little different. Like I know this sounds like asinine to anybody that doesn't understand this, but I slept an extra hour the other day and I felt like I was swinging from the stars. Like,
yeah, you feel like a rebel, you're like, whoa, who is this new version of me? And I think that like structure is fantastic up until the point where it's catastrophic, and so like for men, we love structure. It's what we provide in life and it's what we love, but it's a very fine line because for instance, if you have I'll use my own example. If I know that I wake up every day, I make a morning margarita, I go outside, I sit on my mat and I do breath work in the sun as the sun rises. Then I do my mystery school rituals with my feet in the grass to pick up the Schumann resonance. Then I go inside and meditate. Well, what happens if I have all of that on my calendar in that order? And then I wake up one day and my intuition says, meditate first, right? So like what I've started learning to do is go, okay, I'm going to wake up and put a 2-hour slot of inner work on my calendar. And then I'm going to wake up and tune into what do I want to do in this 2-hour block? And I found that to be really helpful because that way I'm still providing a structure that makes sure I do the things that are necessary for me to feel good and feel like myself, but I'm also giving myself enough wiggle room to play, allow the flow and allow the feminine energy to dance within there. And I think that's really important, especially for men, but for women too, because we both have masculine and feminine energy in our lives.
Yeah. And especially like it becomes this, I like my structure because it keeps me focused because I have a lot going on. But what I found right now is like, for what I always do is like, we're in August right now when we're recording this, and September and we're not in Texas right now, but in Texas it's kind of like a slower month. People are going back to school. It's an interesting month. It's like not a lot's going on. It never has in real estate. But about October every year, I flip the switch because for the last 90 days of the year, I like to run at a pace where I move into the new year with a head of steam so I can attack it, right? And so maybe all that's happening right now is that the universe is tapping on my door and going, hey, buddy, for about a year, you've been running at Mach 30. Let's dial it down. Let's get in some water. Let's do some hiking. Let's have a little fun. Let's play more golf. Like, give yourself the permission. Like maybe that's all that's going on right now. And here's the unfortunate thing. The universe is undefeated.
Yes, 100%, man. And it's funny because this is exactly what I've been moving through. I've been going at a very fast rate for a very long time now. And I love that. That's what charges my battery. But at the same time, I have other things that charge my battery too, that when I'm in this flow, I forget about. Right. And so a lot of times it's about remembering, and sometimes the universe will throw those tricks at you to be able to help you like break out of that matrix and remember like, oh yeah, stop taking yourself so seriously. You can go on a fucking hike. You can go mountain bike. You can, go to the vineyard and hang out on the beach for 2 weeks and actually read those stack of books you've been wanting to read, right? Like you can actually be on what I call vacation vibration and actually in a big way, get more done as a result of it. Because when you get to a certain point and you've been going hard for a long time, sometimes you forget why you're going hard. And sometimes you forget why you're actually like pushing yourself that hard. And so Angelo said it best: for men, feminine energy is a pit stop, not a rest stop. But yet it's still a stop that one must have if they're a man. And this goes for women too, but I'm just bringing up men because we're men talking here. And so if we forget to take that pit stop, right, then what's going to happen is we're not going to be able to give ourselves the necessary care. And like essentially like NASCAR, right? The idea is to race it. But what do they need to do every few laps? They need to go to the pit and get new tires. Because if they don't, they're just going to have a fucking huge accident when they're racing, and then they're going to lose. And so like the same with, our lives as human beings, we need those pit stops to check in on our tires, to make sure our engine's running well, to make sure we have enough fuel so that we can keep going. Because again, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I have to remind myself of this stuff all the time. I'm by no means a master of this. And sometimes what I realize is, I was telling Rachel this last week. I was watching some of my videos and looking at some of my old posts, and I'm like, I never take my own fucking advice. Sometimes I need to watch my own fucking videos and take my own medicine. And it's a coach thing, right?
dude. One of my best friends in the entire world that got me into personal development. I swear to God, I remember this like it was yesterday. We were in Calabasas. I just started dating Cassie, and we were like traveling, and I was in a bad spot. And he was like, "Hey man, so there's this guy on Instagram, and he's this fucking badass, and his name is Austin Linney, and he gives out the best advice ever. You should listen to him." And I was like, fuck. And it's like, I
feel attacked.
It's like, yeah, but it's like, but especially as a coach, it's so easy to just give out advice and help and help and help. And then say like, okay, so like, what's this thing? Cause like, I have a tendency, like I'm, not as bad as I used to be, but I am highly stubborn, like really stubborn, right? Because I get in these spurts and I'm like, hey, I'm flowing, things are going good. And like, I'm kind of, I used to play sports, so I'm a little superstitious, and I'm like, I don't want to break the flow, and, yes. And so like, when that is the thing, like, the problem is that when you run so hard that even the downturn, you can't turn it off. And so what I found is there's two extremes. Like it's either I'm all on or all off. There's no in between. And so, for anybody that's out there that's listening to this, look, every one of my clients, they make good money, but they're just like, hey, I'm not really happy. Right. And so it's like, this can't be it, right? And so when these things are coming up, as Ryan would say, this is your invitation to pick at that thread a little bit more.
100%. And what you're describing there is really what I see in hermetics as the law of polarity, right? So if you picture a pendulum, right, the harder you swing to one direction, well, you're going to have a counter swing to the other. And the idea is being able to find the still point in the middle so that you can actually rise above with the law of neutrality. And so like, there's a great book called The Kybalion, Kybalion. I feel as though this should be given out in first grade, maybe not first grade because it's a little hard to comprehend, but it should be given out by high school for sure, because it really is the rules for life. And if you dive into this, for anyone listening, it will literally teach you, like, you'll have these downloads of just like, wow, I literally see how this is playing within my life. Another one is the law of correspondence, as within, so without, as above, so below. What that means is like we were talking about earlier, if you're looking for love and you're looking externally, well, the reason you can't find it is because you haven't given it to yourself yet. Right. And so like these laws help us navigate through life, and they are our control alt delete button. Because again, what do? We walk around with so many tabs open. And it's not bad that we want to have tabs open, but eventually we run out of RAM. And so we need to close all the tabs. And to do that, if we already have a bunch of tabs open and then we try opening more tabs to figure out how to do it, well, this is what Albert Einstein meant when he said you can't solve a problem from the same level of thinking that created it. It's actually a subtraction that is necessary, but it's much easier to add more things in than subtract, especially when you're a go-getter and you're a high achiever. And this is something that I know you experience. I experience it. I imagine many of the people you work with and listen to the show experience it. And so like, again, this is me taking my own advice here and saying it is that, a lot of times it takes a still point, because imagine that, what do we want on a nice day? We want sunshine, right? And when the clouds are there, we're kind of like, it's not bad, but we wish the sun was there. And so what do we do in our lives? We walk around with a lot of white, fluffy clouds, hopefully white, fluffy and not dark and rainy, but a lot of white, fluffy clouds that are these tabs open, that are all these cars in the mental traffic jam that is our mind. And what do? We try to put more clouds or more cars into the traffic jam to essentially get the result that we're looking for, aka more sun, the traffic jam helping, going away, et cetera. When in reality, it actually takes the clouds dissipating to allow the sun to come through. And what is the sun? This is what I refer to as the higher self, your soul, your heart, your intuition, right? So a lot of times when we have a challenge, it's not that we need to do something to figure it out, right? There's a time to take action. But a lot of times what happens is that if we're in a crisis point, right? Like if we're in a challenge, it just happened, we try to do our way out of it. When in reality, the feminine energy needs to come before the masculine. So we need to take a step back, tune into what our heart is telling us, then use the masculine energy to figure out how we're going to get what the heart's telling us to do done. And that's what I found is really helpful.
I love that. So I want to talk about a topic with you that is I have not formed a full idea on it, but I've been sitting on it for like 2 months, and it's you of all the people, like you're gonna fucking eat this up. All right. So here it is. Do we read books and listen to podcasts to learn something, or do we listen to books and read books to confirm what our soul already knows?
Actually, I think it's the latter. I think it's to confirm what we already know, and it's for validation. And I'll speak to my own experience, right? Because I can't say for everyone, but here's the thing, right? So I imagine you're just like me. I listen to tons of books, listen to tons of podcasts. I'm constantly doing it. And yet there's something in me anyway that's not so worried anymore about remembering every single thing. But every book I read, every podcast I listen to, one thing lands. And I take that one thing is what I already knew, but I didn't trust myself enough to just own it. Right. And so it's almost like training.
That's exactly it, dude.
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah.
Dude, I read a 400-page book, and 2 sentences changed my life.
Yeah. That's what it is. I mean, like, think about it this way. And I've experienced this. So like when I've taken large doses of psilocybin, right, I break through, and there's a point where I get to where I am literally so calm. I'm completely connected to all of my intuitive nature, right? My clairvoyance, my clairaudience, my clairsentience, my intuitive knowing. And I can literally get the answer to any question I've ever wanted. And so then what happened for a long time was I would come out of that and I would forget that. And the last couple of times I've experienced that, especially over the last few years, training with Paul Chek and diving so deep into the mystery school, I've realized that that is always accessible to us. But at the same time, you know, we have a lot of things going on in the life. And so what I do is that instead of being able to meditate for 10 hours a day, because that's just not my mission in this life at this point anyway, I listen to books and I look for what resonates. And then when that resonates with me, I take a note and I contemplate on that one sentence or that one subject or that one download. And then I actually have a conversation with my soul. And I do this a lot with cannabis, where I actually dive in and I go, okay, help me integrate this. What does this mean to me? You know, why is this important to me right now? What is this bringing up in me? What is the next step of me integrating this into my life? And so I think you're on a really good thread there. That's exactly what I've experienced.
Well, and dude, 100%, like, How to Win Friends and Influence People. I didn't read it till like a year ago. And I'm like, I've been living this for like my whole life, you know? Yeah. And it's like, and like, then I picked up this random book, and then the problem in one of the businesses happened 3 days later. And I'm like, what, like, why would I pick up this book? And then like, now we're dealing with this exact problem. Like I wouldn't have known this was a thing until I read the book. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's just like wild to me. Right. So in the same context, I've only shared this with 2 other people too. And I've only heard this one other time on an interview. One of the things that all my ex-business partners and people that know me well compliment me on is we'll give Austin constructive feedback, and the next day he changes. Like the next day it's done, the habits break. So here's how I operate. Here's me, you and I are talking, and then next to me is my soul and my consciousness. And as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking about things and changing things as we're going on, thinking about this situation. And so it's a instant live action correcting at all points. You get what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's integration on the go. You know, and I have a curveball to throw into this too. So do you think that those things land for us because it's what we already knew in our soul? Or do you think that it's touching a pattern that essentially allows us to create that challenge in our lives or that download, right? So like that thing you learned about business, do you think it was that you learned that because that was about to happen? Or do you think it resonated with you because somewhere deep down you believed it was going to happen and then you made it happen? That's a whole nother freaky level of this too. And I don't know the answer. I have no idea.
Well, I mean, look, don't even get me started because yesterday my mind melted. Okay. We don't have time to go into the whole story, but
Yeah.
I digress. But let's just say that something great, okay, did not happen at 2:30 yesterday. Okay. Like 2:30, I got the text. Like literally it says 2:30. It wasn't great. Okay. Not a great thing in my life. Well, that night, Cassie's watching an astrology pick the day and saying at 2:30, some person will not be able to push through something because they're scared and something bad is going to happen to you. And I'm like, okay, okay, what? And that's when I'm like, do I need to get an astrologist? Like,
well, this is what I talk about when I say that, a lot of people are like, oh, you shouldn't do psychedelics all the time, yada, yada. And I agree. And I say life is a psychedelic. Like reality itself is a psychedelic. And when you're following your heart, right, you're following your soul, whatever you choose to believe, following the quantum realm, whatever it is, you start having synchronicities, and not all of them are positive in nature, but they were like, actually, I believe that they actually all are positive in nature, just yet we haven't integrated why they're positive yet if they're not. And so like that thing that happened to you, that might have actually blown up way worse 6 months down the line. And so it actually saved you. But right now, or maybe yesterday, especially, it was viewed as inherently bad because it wasn't exactly what you wanted. But a lot of the times it's kind of like, if you're a parent and you have a kid, right? And, this kid gets stomach aches all the time because they eat too much sugar. And so they want to go in at 5 ice cream cones. And you're like, hey, listen, you don't want to eat all those ice cream cones. So you can have 2. And they're like, God damn it, Dad, I wanted these 5. But then they don't get a stomach ache and they're able to go out and play with their friends. Right. So it's like, there's such a mystery to this. And I think that that's the great part about life, is that there's mystery, right? There's things that I will never know. I mean, honestly, I'm never going to know anything objectively. And that's what psychedelics have showed me. And so therefore I get to be in the mind of a child now, not all the time. It's not always perfect, but when I'm really in the flow, it's because I realized that I'm not worried about knowing anything. I'm not worried about figuring it out. Because let me ask you a question. And for everyone listening, would you rather open your Christmas presents on Christmas morning or before? Right. And so I feel as though wherever we go after this, what I choose to believe is that we are infinite beings. And so if we go there and we get this mystery solved, then why would we want to solve it when we're down here? I love like the feeling of, like, for instance, I was at a music festival one time. This is a quick story, but it's one that really brings us home. You want to talk about weird shit happening? So I was at a music festival once, took some LSD, and like every LSD story I've ever heard goes, it was more than I imagined. So we're walking around this festival for a while, and we decided to go back to camp to kind of like, touch earth again. So we go back there, we're landing, we're starting to have conversations again. Everyone's like, moving out of this experience. Some guy walks by and goes, oh, you're from Massachusetts, whereabouts? Because our car was right next to our camp. And so I tell him my town, and he goes, dude, I'm from that same town. And I'm like, oh, cool. And my town's pretty small, right? So it's still weird, but I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, what part? He's like, north. I'm like, that's where I'm from. And this is in the middle of Michigan. And then I'm like, what street? He says my fucking street name. So immediately I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Then in the middle of Michigan at a festival of 75,000 people, I happen to take a large dose of LSD, happen to come back to my tent at a specific time where he's walking by. He sees a license plate and we have this conversation. What the fuck are the chances of that? But yet that happened, right? I have no fucking explanation for it, and I don't want to, because if I did, it wouldn't be magic, but it's pure magic.
I love that. So I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I have these like, gut reactions. I have these feelings. I send these texts right at the right time and send the song right at the right time. Like, I really want to explore this. And she goes, don't. She goes, why would you try to unearth something that is just, inherently in you, right? And so like what I'm saying is like we all have certain things, and I think what we're creating is we're creating a space where we're denying those things, right? And one of the stories that blows me away more than anything, and business guys get so mad at me when I make them read this book, but a book called Big Magic, right? The lady that wrote Eat, Pray, Love. They read the book and they're like, why the fuck am I reading this book? It's very simple. It's one story. So the author comes up with this story in her head about a 1930s gold miner in a small town in Argentina that falls in love with somebody else, like this, this whole thing, right? So gets the story, and for 4 years never writes it, right? Thinks about it, but doesn't put it together. Meets her idol. So she's in Michigan. The other one's in California. Meets her idol. They're becoming friends. 3 months pass. The mentor says to the lady, hey, I'm writing a new book, and it's about a 1930s gold farmer in this small town in Argentina who falls in love. And the lady goes, what? That's my story. And then she says, I didn't respect my art enough to write the story. So the art moved on to the next person.
Yes. And this is what I believe it's Rupert Sheldrake talks about with the morphic resonance field. We've all heard of the 99th monkey effect, right? Where these researchers were looking at monkeys on this island. I forget exactly what type of monkey, but they discovered that these monkeys were learning a new way to open sweet potatoes. And then researchers on the mainland, which these monkeys did not swim, started noticing at the same time that the monkeys they were watching, same monkeys, right? Same species of monkey, learned how to open sweet potatoes the same way at the same time. So it shows that we're all tapping into some like unified field, right? And the quantum physics talks about this with the quantum field. Spirituality says essentially like spirit, whatever you choose to believe, there's something there. And it's far too weird to ever truly comprehend as a human being. The most we can do is get into it and realize we'll never know anything about it. And so we get to be curious observers where we're not looking for answers. We're just getting curious and following the breadcrumb trail. And I think that when we look at life that way, right? Like it's much less about explaining it, because the more that you think you know, the more closed-minded and the more dull life gets. Because when you know something, not when you think or believe or imagine something, when you know something, like if I know that the color of your eyes is brown, right? And you're like, my eyes aren't brown, but I just know that. Well, then at the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to be open to you explaining, hey, my eyes are not brown, right? That's a silly example, but like, let me give you another one, right? So we've all heard the flat earth theory, right? I like to bring up this one because it's a hilarious example. Well, at the end of the day, why does anyone fucking care if someone believes the earth is flat, right? But yet people are bitching about it online, wasting all their energy trying to prove people wrong that the earth is round, right? Now, I've never been to outer space. I don't choose to believe the earth is flat. But if someone believes that, the first question I'm going to ask them is, why do you believe that? I want to know. Not because I have to take on their belief, but because I like trying all the flavors of ice cream. Even if I know chocolate's my favorite and that's what I choose to believe in is chocolate ice cream, doesn't mean I'm going to want to try coffee or Oreo ice cream one time, because I like variety. It's the spice of life. So like, this is what makes us unique. You know, like we don't want to all be the same. That would be so fucking boring. But yet we're all unconsciously trying to make each other the same and try to get people to believe what we believe because it helps us feel safer about life. It's just crazy, man. This is a paradox that I've gone through a lot of my life. And when I was about 23, I had a strong psilocybin experience where essentially it was like, why do you care? You're never going to know anything. And so I was like, whoa, that's really interesting. And I actually had a really crazy story. Are you familiar with Ben Stewart? He made Psychedelica and Limitless on Gaia. He's an amazing filmmaker, super smart, really big in the world of esoteric stuff. So I had him on this one time on psychedelics, and he was sharing the story at Solterra that he went to recently, which is a place in Costa Rica that does ayahuasca.
Yeah, I've driven by it 7 times. I'm very familiar.
So he's there with some big name people. I won't mention who. If you go research, you can find some stuff out. But he's there with some big name people, and they're all in ceremony. And all of a sudden, he starts noticing that everyone's making insect noises at the same time. And so he wasn't drawn to make the noises. He was kind of like, what's everyone doing? He just kind of came aware, like, everyone's making insect noises. So he kind of opens his eyes, and in the room, he sees 3 manted beings, essentially as insectoids, right? And so he felt the call to tell them, like, hey, it's cool to be here. He could tell they were kind of like nervous about being there, like, are we welcome here? So he's like, hey, you're cool being here. So one of them comes over and sits down next to him and goes, I know everything. What's the point? Right? And so he realized that this being believed that it knew everything in the universe. And so there was no point to living. And so telepathically, he communicated to this being, are you convinced or are you intrigued? And the second intrigued came out of his mouth, like, and he finished that sentence, all the noises stopped in the room. And the mantis being just looked at him, looked back, and then faded away. And for people listening, that might be the most woo-woo story you've ever heard in your life. If you look into Ben Stewart, trust me, he's not a woo-woo. I mean, he's a woo-woo person, but he has a lot of credibility behind him. But like that, or it essentially encapsulates what we're talking about, right? Like we can get ourselves into such a pickle and make life so dull because we think we have it all figured out. When in reality, we don't have shit figured out. And that's the point. We're supposed to mess up.
Yeah.
We're supposed to color outside the lines, you know?
That's my number one lesson to everybody is that you think the guy that has 4,000 units or 7 businesses hasn't figured it out. He's just as lost as you are. And to be honest with you, probably doubts himself more. He's just not willing to attach himself to it.
Yes, exactly. He's separate from it. He experiences it. He's not it. And that's
guys, everybody that's listening out there, just so we're fucking clear, so you know somebody, it's me. I still every day, but the moment I did not attach myself to him, I said, hey, that's a feeling. I get it. But what's the other option? No, it's to push forward. That's it.
Yes, 100%. And, a modality for anyone listening, if you want to look into this and kind of like dive into this world more, internal family structure, aka IFS. This is like essentially what this modality does. And I've trained in this a lot, where essentially he breaks open. I think the guy's name is Richard Schwartz. I might be wrong. I think I'm right on that. But he dives into this whole idea of multiple personality disorder. And he essentially, burns the sacred cow by saying that we all have multiple personalities. It's just that people that get diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, their personalities are farther apart. So when they're in each one of these personalities, you can tell they're a totally different person. Where ours, right? Like one might be fear, one might be anxiety, one might be anger, one might be excitement, one might be passion, right? But we have all these different personalities. And if we can actually get in there and get back into the seat at the head of the dinner table, which is the self, and hear these voices, but not experience these voices, but not be them, then we can actually hear out what maybe anger is saying to anxiety and be their mediator, right? Like we are all our own coach first, right? And that's
I love, thank you for hitting on that. The question is, are you angry or are you sad?
Yes.
I think parts of me are sad. I don't think I'm angry.
Well, you know what anger is? If you look at David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, anger is consciousness on the rise, right? Like shame, guilt, sadness, those are lower density emotions. And when anger presents itself, it actually means that it's coming through you, right? And right after anger, I believe comes pride, and then there's courage, and then neutrality. And then you start moving up into like love, harmony, enlightenment is at the very top. So like a lot of times, like you were saying, right? Like there's times you want to scream. You remember when you were a kid, for anyone listening, and you too, Austin, you remember when you were a kid and you were happy, and then all of a sudden you didn't get your ice cream cone or something. And so you cried and you cried and you cried, and your mom was like, I'm not giving it to you. And eventually you were just cried out, and then you went and played anyway. You didn't get your problem fixed, but you were just happy. Well, that's what I'm talking about, right? Emotions come in waves, and the more that we can express them and not judge them, well, then we just experience them, and every emotion is going to run its course if we allow it to do so. But what happens is people get so scared, and I'm one of these people. I have been this person. So like people get so scared of the emotion that they end up holding it off for 10, 20, 30 years. And they live in suffering because they're just not willing to feel it fully. When in reality, that emotion could be felt fully in as little as 10 minutes. And then it's gone.
And then move on.
Yeah.
Well, that is the one thing that's great about guys is like, we're like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, we're over it. Like
exactly. Worst thing we'll do is punch each other a couple of times and be like, all right, cool, man, let's go grab a beer or a joint or whatever. It's like, I am very grateful that I am a guy in this lifetime. Women are way more powerful than I would be able to handle, No,
I 100% stack my corporation with lots of women.
Yeah.
Because we need some sanity. We need some sanity in that situation.
Yes. I mean, I tell Rachel all the time, like, you guys are definitely the stronger gender. And I have no problem admitting that because I don't have to interact with all the stuff, right? It's kind of like, you see the CEO and you might think like, oh, I want their job. And then you realize how much they do. And you're like, you know what? I'm fine in my role, right? That's how I feel.
Dude, I tell you right now, and I mean this wholeheartedly to everybody that's listening out there, moms that have more than, just fucking one kid. The fact that y'all get anything done and hold down a job, God bless you. I literally don't. Everything that you want to do is closed when you get off work. So I don't know how the fuck you get everything done. I have no idea.
I mean, you want to talk about hustle mentality, right? Like I learned a lot from Rachel, and I thought I was a hustler, right? But like just the things she does and she doesn't even think about it. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And I think that like we're speaking to this deeper truth that we all come from the same source, at least what I choose to believe, but we're all different shades and colors of that same source. And so we have the opportunity to learn from one another. But when we're so busy getting fucking triggered and trying to say that we're better or any of these things that people get stuck into, then we miss the lesson because, I forget what spiritual guru said it. I mean, a lot of them said it in different ways, but like, Ram Dass specifically said, we are all walking each other home. So what I take that to mean is that when I talk to you, there's going to be certain things you say that actually like resonate with me because that's where I'm at right now. And that's why we get along, because we're at a very similar level. And so this is the idea of like, you are the collection of the people you spend the most time with, right? Well, like a lot of times that's looked at quantitatively, right? Like, oh, I just choose different people and I have a different reality. Well, it's not really that, right? It's that as you choose to work on yourself, you're going to start resonating to different people. And certain people in your life are either going to go, hey, I like that thing you're doing. Tell me more about it. Then the invitation's made and they're going to come with you. And other ones are either going to go, no, thank you. Or they're going to try to trigger you to bring you back down to their level completely unconsciously. And so like, this is the idea of we're all walking each other home, but we get to choose what path we want to walk. And whoever walks that path with us are the people that are meant for us, people, places, and things that are meant for us. And so, I mean, it really comes back to like, it's all divine timing. It's all perfect in nature, but yet we have to come to the conclusion that it's perfect in its own way, because it's probably not going to be exactly lined up with what we think is perfect in our logical mind. But deeper in our hearts and our souls, we're going to realize when we really come down to it, holy fuck, I'm so lucky. I'm so glad all this stuff happened. I'm so glad for my challenges. I'm so grateful for it all, because it made me who I am.
Well, thank God we have a board of advisors, and they're amazing people that have been through the wars. And she said something to me, we had a quick conversation. She said, Austin, I'll tell you this. You'll be so thankful that you didn't get that money, because that money is toxic.
Exactly.
And you don't want that energy in your life. It wants to be exchanged properly. You need to have a fair exchange. You want to do it. And man, I'm telling you, like, it kind of just set me back, and it's like, okay, like, cool. Like, that's what I thought I wanted. And the thing is like, it's still not easy to digest, but it definitely makes it easier to understand, like, hey, not all money's created equal. Not all relationships, not all business partners, not all client coach relationships. And I don't mean that I'm not at fault. That's not what I'm saying. But when I've examined the relationship, I realize that me as a human, I'm showing up at all times. Mm-hmm. So as much as I try to blame myself, they might not just be ready to make the shift. And 100%. And here's where it gets fun. Here's where it hurts as a coach. That lesson that they might not accept right now could change their life 4 years from now. And like my podcast producer says, if you told me that your ultimate mission, no matter what, is to impact everybody, then you need to be okay with it going south sometimes.
Yes, because that's part of impacting hard. People. Because if you want to impact everyone, well, if you're only successful and that's the only thing that you believe about your life, well, then you're not going to be able to impact everyone, because there's some people that feel like a failure and they're going to need to hear someone else go, hey, I feel like a failure sometimes too. And this is what I do to get through it. And then they go, holy shit, if he can do it, I can do it. And boom, now you impacted people. And so I think this is like really, an opportunity, an invitation, rather, to use that word again, that we all have in our life, is to look at everything in our lives as an opportunity to connect deeper with those around us, and ourselves first, of course, but those around us, because we are all going to lose someone we love. We're all going to have our heart broken for something. We're all going to wish for the best for something and have it not work out. And so we're actually universal in a lot of ways. And this is how I really believe we're going to move from, not to open a deep rabbit hole, but we're going to move from scientific materialism, which is the kind of like meaning that society is attached to right now. I only believe it if I can see it with my eyes, into holism, right? Which is, oh, actually, we're all much more alike than we are different. And it doesn't matter what color skin we have or what gender.
We don't have another hour. We don't have another hour. But dude, funny enough, I stopped young camp people who were talking about, they were reading their Bible, and I loved that they were like working on themselves and like asking questions. And like, I stopped to talk to them for like 20 minutes, and they said, what do you know? Like, what is something you're out there in the world? They're young. You're out there in the world. Like, what? I said, it's very simple, that every one of your religions and every one of you beings or people are way more alike than you think.
Yes.
Buddhism and Christian, if you study them at the core of the religion, they're the same thing.
Be good to yourself and others. It's so simple, right? And because it's simple, that's what gets people fucked up, because our intellect, right? The left brain has been running our society for thousands of years. And it's also been going to the gym for most of us since we were 6 years old. So it's almost like that dude you see that skipped leg day. Well, legs are our right brain, right? They're the ability to actually connect with one another and realize, like, wait a minute, We might be using different language or saying words in a different order, but we're saying the same thing because our egos are so entrenched in like, no, we have to be right. And so because we're so focused on being right, well, where attention goes, energy flows. So if someone isn't saying the exact same thing as you, they're wrong. When in reality, the right brain allows you to actually hear things, take a step back and go, that sounds a lot like what I'm saying. And this is what one of the amazing things that cannabis does. There was a video that came out a while ago of this like priest, a rabbi, and like a rapper that smoked a joint together. And they just had this conversation. They came back to like, yeah, man, we're saying the same thing. This is awesome. And they all high-fived, right? Because they were able to get into the right brain, right? You don't need cannabis to do this, but it can be a good pattern interrupt if you're currently stuck in the left brain and you discern that this is right for you in your life, to be able to actually have constructive conversations with even people that you might not like. Because a lot of times we're triggered most by the people that we're most like, because we're all reflections of one another. And so we can learn so much from the people that we actually get frustrated the most around. And trust me when I say, I know how fucking hard it is, but I'm telling you, if you're someone out there who potentially interacts with cannabis, smoke a joint with someone you're having a challenge with and watch the magic that happens. And you don't need to do that, but it can be a way to kind of pattern interrupt or bypass the left brain if you just don't know how to get out of it and you want to have the direct experience of what we're talking about with the right brain.
I love it. So if people want to, good luck. Getting on the sales call, but if people want to find out the podcast, they want to find out about your group, how would they do that?
Yes. So best place to reach me. I do still manage my own Instagram at this point. So at the real Ryan Sprague, I fucking love connecting. Rachel asked me recently, like, are you going to let someone else manage? I'm like, that's what I love the most is connecting. So find me on there at the real Ryan Sprague. SPRAGUE is my last name. The business account, if you want to learn more cannabis tricks, at highly.optimized. We have a free Facebook group called the Ceremony Circle. I'm in there once a week, giving it live and open it up for questions and answers. It's super fun. Great way to connect with like-minded individuals. We have the free Conscious Cannabis guide you can download if you're into cannabis and you want to dive into what I do with cannabis. And then also the podcasts, the Highly Optimized podcast, which showcases conscious leaders living a life beat to their own drum, and the This One Time on Psychedelics podcast, which dives into true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of plant medicine. So you've been on both of them. Go check out Austin's episodes. They're fucking fire. So that's where you guys can find me.
I love it, man. I appreciate you so much. Guys, if you got some value from this episode, send it to a friend. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.